Hello and welcome to the What's Up Doc podcast. We have our guest today, Derek Immig from Marshall Retail Group. He's the Senior Director of Logistics. And of course, you have our host, me, Jeff Booth, and
Calissa Pollard. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
we're excited for a great conversation today. And gosh, I think this is our fifth, sixth. We're starting to get a few of these under our belt, starting to get our training wheels off and feeling good. So with that, Derek, welcome to the show. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Logistics. I guess my life story and logistics go pretty hand in hand. I joined the Army in 1996. My first logistics role was actually several years later, but still when I was young and kind of shaping who I wanted to be. I didn't know I wanted to do logistics, by the way. Did a lot of things logistics in the Army. I served 22 years. 2018, I retired. I transitioned over to Amazon. I was pretty fortunate there that Amazon was standing up transportation operations management, internal transportation operations, more internal logistics around fulfillment operations. Spent nearly 2 years there and got the opportunity to jump a couple levels, big couple levels, get my own building at what was then U.S. Auto Parts, what became CarParts.com. Spent the last 2.5 years there, promoted into a network role, doing distribution center operations. Operational excellence was my title. And just 2 months ago in September, I joined Marshall Retail Group, Senior Director of Logistics over here. And this is where I am 2 months in.
That's quite a range there. You have the U.S. military, you have the world's biggest e-commerce player in Amazon. You jump into the car parts space, and now you're in Marshall Retail Group, which is really interesting. And we'll dig into kind of what they do because I don't think a lot of people would know that brand, but they probably shopped and purchased from Marshall without just necessarily knowing it. But at the beginning, you mentioned getting into logistics in the military, and that wasn't your first job. It's not like you left high school and you're like, I can't wait to get into military logistics. So how in the world did you find yourself there?
That's good. Yeah, I joined the Army. So I was a waiter, not a waiter. I was a cook at Waffle House. Spring break, my senior year in Oklahoma. I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was generally smart. I didn't do much homework, so my grades didn't reflect. So it's not like I had scholarships waiting on me. I hadn't even really applied to colleges. I had an idea that I wanted to go back to Las Vegas where I grew up. And a recruiter came in, literally said, "Hey son, what do you want to be?" I mean, like, we walked around seeing cadences in the Army and basic training. And my recruiter came to me, said, "Hey son, what do you want to be?" It literally was like that. He's sitting at the counter, like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I could do military intelligence." I remember thinking military intelligence, that sounds cool, right? So less than 7 days later, in spring break, I don't think I made it out of the week, spring break week. My mom had taken a 17-year-old boy down to MEPS, recruiting station, or I'm sorry, the recruiting station, and I swore in as a military police officer and just a trainee. And when I graduated high school, I went to basic training and military police school. I didn't get military intelligence because it wasn't available. I mean, that's the way it works. Like, oh, like, you would be a good fit for military police. You ever thought about that? And I was like, man, I could be a cop in the civilian world. So yeah, it was actually reserves. I joined the reserves. I transferred, came back from training, moved to Las Vegas and joined an MP unit and started going to college at UNLV. And I deployed after September 11th when we increased security all around the country. They mobilized my unit. We went to California. It was the worst. It was worse than any other deployment I ever had. So you were so close to home, so far away. I was young. I wasn't ready for stuff like that. And then I went to officer school, and I went to officer school to be a military police officer. Right. So my career was heading down military police. But in the meantime, in that time of me going to school, my military police unit went to Iraq when the war started, and they stood up Abu Ghraib prison, the same Abu Ghraib prison that you've heard of, and the one where people got in so much trouble. my unit that opened that prison is the unit that turned it over to the one that got in so much trouble, right? So my unit didn't do anything wrong. There were multiple congressional level investigations that confirmed that, they ran a good operation. They trained their following unit very well, but that unit did what they did. In any case, I missed my opportunity to deploy, was really what this was coming down to. I hadn't gone to Iraq, and all of my friends had went to Iraq, and units were cycling through, and it was only going to be a matter of time before I got the opportunity. But I got selected because there was a transportation unit deploying to the same combat zone, and they were short lieutenants, and I had just come back from military police officer school, and uh, my battalion commander's like, hey, you got to go with this unit. We need you. And I was like, can I go on my honeymoon first? Because I just got married. And they're like, all right, you can go on your honeymoon. So let me go on my honeymoon, and I caught up the unit. And when I got, this is where my life in logistics began. And it was very anticlimactic. I'll tell you that right now. Right. When I was in the Army, as a military policeman, we did some cool stuff. We had the best weapons. We thought we were infantry, but just not infantry. Nobody in logistics thinks they're infantry, right? I mean, you do things like you sit around and wait. My very, very first mission was to take empty trucks to the port and pick up containers of ammunition. And so I kind of planned through this convoy mission, and you get where you're going, and then you just sit there for hours and just wait as your trucks just creep through the process. And then it gets loaded, and then you drive your 2-hour trip to take your container, and then you come back and you get back in that line and you wait again. And I was like, man, this sucks. But what I noticed about it, believe it or not, was like, if you just put a little planning into this, like, you can make this a little more enjoyable. We can do this in segments. Why do I need 25 trucks sitting in line? We can go in groups of 10, right? Every 2 hours, and give everybody a break. So I started doing things like that. You know what I actually realized was logistics was an opportunity to just be a very good leader. That's really what it came down to. Attention to details, connecting the dots, understand, this is the 40-year-old me talking, understanding root cause, working on the improvements, being continuously driven to do things better. And I've said this my whole life about logistics, like in Army transportation. Any idiot can get a group of vehicles from one location to another. It can take a very long time. Some vehicles can get lost. Some may break down. If you don't check your loads become unsecure and become an issue on the road. You can get attacked by the enemy and not have a good plan to defend yourself. You can choose the wrong route. Like, there's a lot of ways to make it really, really good, and there's a lot of ways to mess it up. And so what I saw it as, kind of glass half full. There was a lot of opportunities to do things right, and I enjoyed it. I just enjoyed working out every little detail and making sure people informed and understood the roles and knew what to do, and I enjoyed it. So I deployed as a transportation platoon leader, drove all over the country of Iraq. I mean, I got to do more cool things than any, most people did out there. I spent more time out on the road in Iraq with my weapon locked and loaded in a vehicle, in a Humvee, than most people spent in the entire deployment. So, I was pretty fortunate. I came back from that. I didn't want to go into transportation anymore, and it pulled me right back in. So I just gave up. I got another opportunity to deploy in transportation. I literally gave up and said, all right, I'm tired. I'm not going to pretend I'm not a logistician. I converted my branch. I moved full blown in logistics. At one point in this Nevada Army National Guard, where I was an active duty soldier in Nevada Army National Guard. I was the most senior true logistician in the organization, simply because we didn't have a lot of logistics officers and a lot of depth, and I've been doing it for so long, and I come to enjoy it. And that took me to Amazon, and I'm sure you got lots of questions about either what I said or where I was going, so I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, on the military front, did you find that most of the people who were in the logistics space with you had a similar path in terms of, it's not like they set out to be this, right? Especially during that time, I feel like logistics is now started to become more of a focus. We now have, college degree programs around it and things like that. But at that time, did it feel like everyone else had kind of just stumbled their way there?
So one of the jobs I got to do in the Army was to run the Reserve Officer Training Corps ROTC program at UNLV, where I graduated from college. So that was an interesting experience. And in that, when you're making officers, you get the opportunity to select your branches. Not a lot of people select logistics in their top one. The ones that do are smart, really, really smart, right? And they see the transferable skill set to the civilian sector. It's much more clear there than any other field, you know. But a lot of them end up there by accident, you know, not necessarily accident, but like it wasn't their first choice. I'll make a reasonable second choice that I'll get, right? Because you know everybody wants to be a pilot, and when you don't get to be a pilot, everybody moves to your number two. How do you want to spend your number two? You know, like should you, maybe nobody else will pick this, so I'm going to get something I want. On the enlisted side, I think a lot of this. I don't want to speak with too much authority on this, but I believe most of the skill requirements are slightly higher than your combat arms. You know, when it comes to like, you know, problem solving and, you know, things that are associated with like motor skills. Like, you know, you go through a test in the Army, they give you a test that's called the ASVAB, which kind of tells you what you're good at learning or good at doing. You know, they're good at lining people up with those kind of skill sets. I'll tell you, the ones that are really, really good in logistics are the ones that start off in combat arms or start off in these high speed type units and then transition over logistics and are able to use their understanding and drive to complete the main mission or the main operation and then develop what logistical support around that looks. That's who's really successful.
I remember the ASVAB. Calissa, did you take the ASVAB test? Do you remember it? I remember my scores from it. Calissa, did you ever take it?
What'd you get?
I don't remember my scores, but I'm pretty sure I took it at some point. Yeah.
Oh, like I can still remember the printout. So what's hard is I don't know how good of a predictor that is. Like I was in the, you know, I scored really high in like some of the reading, language, math. So I really thought about how that would transfer and was like, well, Jeff can add two numbers together faster than almost anyone we know. I was frightened about what that would set me up for because I don't find that to be a very useful skill in the practical world, that I'm really fast at doing basic multiplication and division. But I remembered scoring very high in those and very low in something like mechanical. You know,
See,
I wasn't
I
able
scored
to.
really low in mechanical too. I remember looking at this. I remember looking at this going, I have no idea, and I'm guessing.
Right, the
Almost.
question,
Yeah.
the questions were so funny. It was like they draw you a little diagram. And you're like, if you pull this lever, what happens to these three things? Is like, I don't know. Can we go back to where I answered like 800 multiplication questions in like 6 minutes? Like, can we do that? Because I'm really good at that. But I didn't know how well that was going to help me in the world. So that's great. I love the ASVAB connection.
Yeah, the trick about the way that process works is the ASVAB gives you a baseline score and qualifies you for job assignments based on whatever those job assignments require certain skills, right? You know, you'll have different requirements or different reads on being a pilot versus being a mechanic. Whatever that math looks like, that doesn't dictate what you go into as a field. What dictates what you go into as a field is what position that recruiter who's standing in front of you is trying to fill, right? His job is to fill vacancies, and he fills vacancies in the places where the vacancies are the most impactful, not where you want to go.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get this great background, this ultimate crash course, I'd probably call it, in logistics, right? Because you know, I might have got some experience at retail where, like, if when I was at Circuit City, like if a TV didn't get there on time, it might have got me some understanding. You were doing what I would call the most real life logistics, like feeding and taking care of soldiers, weapons, things in the most hostile of conditions, right?
I appreciate you thinking like that. You're right. This was the coolest jobs, the coolest deployment I had was when I was doing transportation, right? Even as a platoon leader, or even sometimes a company commander, but squad leaders, you know, you get your group of soldiers and your trucks, your vehicle, and you leave and you're gone. You're taking something hundreds of miles away. You've got 2 or 3 different overnight locations to stop at. You got to coordinate. You know, you're literally dictating people's lives, their security, and that's good and bad. Like, hey, I want you guys in bed by 10 o'clock tonight. We have a 3 a.m. wake up. You know, I'm not somebody's dad, right? basically saying, look, asshole, you got to get 5 hours of sleep. Okay. You're going to drive tomorrow, 5 hours. That's what I'm asking. You got to coordinate when they get food. I need your maintenance done, right? Your maintenance is important because it's important to everybody else to not break down on the side of the road where an enemy can come attack us. So, and you know what? People appreciate good leadership. So like I worked really hard to do my best at those things, and I messed a lot of them up. I did that lost lieutenant thing. I missed my turn one time going into Baghdad, and it was a scary situation. It turned out to not have super dire consequences, but it wasn't fantastic for anybody. It was pretty couple-hour hellhole for everybody.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You list a lot of these things that are really transferable to our logistics here in the US that we struggle with in what I would call maybe like at least close to optimal conditions, right? We have a pretty good road system, food, running water. We struggle with tracking trucks and losing vehicles and stolen loads and all of these fleet maintenance, and we have all those issues here in the most friendliest of environments where we have quick stops, we have mobile mechanics, we have all these things, and it's really hard for us in the private sector. And now you think about, oh my gosh, what does that look like in hostile conditions where you're not expected to be there or not wanted there, and like that's just a completely different game. So I'm curious how that sets things up for what's the transition into Amazon. I've certainly heard stories where sometimes Amazon logistics feels militant in its discipline levels because it's so big and it's growing so fast that you have to have some of those same traits. Like, what's that first transition job look like at Amazon?
No, I'll never forget like the first 30 minutes of day one. My boss at Amazon, my boss who hired me I left the army as a major promotable. I retired. My boss was a former captain. He knew he was hiring me, right? I'm retiring from the military into this junior to him. He knew he was kind of getting a good deal. So I think I got a pretty fair shake as far as salary went coming in at that time. And I was a senior guy, and I went in and he walked me around my building. I own the logistics portion of it. I basically own the dock. I own the dock and all the coordination associated with. You had operations inside. If the trailer door went open, they'd go to work. It was my job to put the right trailers on the right doors, which kept this side empty, full. Same thing on that side. I remember walking around and the first day going, okay, I'm a platoon leader again. I'm back to having a first job. This is the first job as an officer. It was the same level of an operation it was. So like that didn't discourage me. I just went into kicking ass and doing everything I could to make that thing really, really exceptional. I think I did. I enjoyed it. But Amazon is not a joke. Amazon was very militaristic in the terms of it's full of A-type personalities and people who want to succeed, right? That's what I'd say more than anything. People who care. And Amazon, then unlike any other place, you will see a very, very clean building, right? Because they take pride in what they do. Nobody walks by something on the ground and picks it up. I got to teach things like that in multiple buildings and in different companies. You got to teach people like, hey, when we walk by something like that, we got to pick it up. It's showing pride, right?
Yeah, you mentioned first job, and then going from there, you elevate pretty quickly from kind of this operations manager role into director at Car Parts, and then senior director now where you're at. Calissa, you were asking some questions earlier in the pre-call around advice in the logistics space, growing careers, things like that. What are you thinking when you see this transition from Derek, like making that jump from private sector or from military to private sector, and then that growth trajectory? What are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think I'm actually more curious about just getting into the logistics industry because that's my personal experience too, where you just kind of fall into it and then you find that there's so much opportunity here. And pretty much everyone around me is also very new to logistics as well. So we're all just here to learn and understand and grow. And then hopefully we can become experts just like yourself, Derek, where we're 20 years out and we're,
I don't
able
think,
to.
I don't think, I think that expert thing can be very subjective. But I will tell you, I have some wisdom in logistics.
Yeah.
Wisdom is experience and time,
Yeah.
right? And looking at things. There's a lot of things I messed up, and a lot of things I'm excited to try. There's just a full gamut.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have for people who are new to logistics and helping them succeed in this crazy world of ours?
What advice do I have for someone looking at? Why not? I mean, look, you got to pay your dues in logistics, right? I paid my dues a couple times. I paid it on the first time around. I paid it when I went to Amazon as back to being like a cherry butter bar, I guess, to use some military term. Um, I was very fortunate. Like, get experience, get experience in big, get experience where you can. I'll tell you that what's making me successful here today in Marshall Retail Group is knowing that there are other ways to do things, right? And there's more ways to solve something than the way you've traditionally done it. Um, you get that with experience, multiple organizations, multiple style buildings. Like Amazon does have that right. Amazon has that right. They help you. You want to move in Amazon, you want to go to different roles, they're all about it, especially in operations, logistics, everything around basically moving packages, because they have kind of two sides of the business. They move data and they move packages. On the packages side, there's so many opportunities, so many roles. It's like what helps me now is that I've done so many different types of things. I did convoys, I've done rail, I've done ports, I've done retrograde operations, I've done, routine sustainment, I've done civilian distribution. I've even dabbled in robotics in my last company, which, it's embracing, right now, some great advice for right now is to embrace the technologies and understand where they fit in. And I've been to a couple conferences, and you got small, you got big, and you got everybody that's in between. And the struggles are in the in between phase, because when it comes to like robotics and technologies, ROIs are built on mass scale. It's easy to know that you don't need big technologies when you're running a small operation. It's when you get into this middle phase that you start to get outrun by things, and there are opportunities where technologies, new processes, process control, process changes, like, get involved, get experience, get involved. Someday you'll show up and you realize, like, I've done a lot of things. I don't have all the answers, but there's always a way to solve something.
Nice.
Have a
That's great
positive attitude.
advice. Awesome. Yeah. And one thing that really stood out to me that you kind of said a few sentences ago too is that people at Amazon just really cared. And I personally have been kind of experiencing this where, just some individuals don't seem to like care as much, right, as maybe you do. And you want to kind of control freak things maybe in some way, but really it's just that you truly like are caring about your job and doing a good job. And maybe I'm more of an A-type personality, I guess. But what advice do you have for people who, are more laissez-faire? They don't really care as much. Like, how do you get them to actually care about like picking up, trash in the warehouse or just
You know,
doing
it,
things that they should be
okay,
doing?
so there's always gonna be, there's studies on this. There's anecdotal stuff. There's always like 15% of the people in any population who are, you could call bottom performers, you call them bottom give a shitters, what do you call them, whatever you want to, right? I mean,
I
they
like that
could
one.
perform, but they don't care today, right? There's always
Exactly.
that 50%.
Mm.
The motivation, they have to be led by first line leaders, right? That's where, so like one of the things that we're working on in Marshall Retail Group is our first line leadership, right? We're very focused on building capable leaders. I can say that, building the most capable leaders, right?
And when you say first line leader, that means like, they're just like the first time manager,
Yes,
or what
that's
does that
exactly
mean?
right.
Okay.
Those are the people that run warehouses. Like,
Gotcha.
big warehouses are planned and organized and run by senior operations managers, and the plans are, the plans are very easily cascaded down for the day with fantastic KPIs and the ability to monitor those KPIs in real time. Well, for the rest of us, it's like, hey, I understand we don't have rates built engineered uh, labor rates built in for this process, but you generally know what the right process is and how fast somebody should be moving. I'm teaching, the topic I'm teaching right now today to my first line leaders is two things. It's a warehouse, two warehouse principles, right? Utilization and efficiency. And the most important of that today for my organization is utilization. That is, and I look at my supervisors and I say, there's two things about what your associates are doing to note here, right? One is how fast they're doing the work that you ask them to do, right? You can do an observation and go, he's moving the widgets in the right process. He's not doing steps out of order. That looks right. Okay. Somebody could be doing the right things and be really, really slow. They could be doing them in the wrong order. And that's where, as a supervisor, you step in and you go, hey, this is on you. I've shown you the right way to do this. Here's another example. Have you considered this? What else can I do? But there's something that the supervisors own 100%, and that is the associates' utilization. What are they doing? What are they doing? How long does it take everyone in the warehouse to get started on their tasks? When do you get your first scan? Do they wander off in the middle of their shift for a long extra bathroom break or a cup of coffee? Like, that's utilization. And we're teaching leaders now, is like, you own utilization, and you own it the same way that I owned it in the Army when I was leading convoys. Create a good plan, make sure everybody's informed, and then follow up and make sure they're doing those things.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, and you can tell where I feel like the leadership background, because I feel like the military really focuses on leadership, right? Building leaders, and you can see where that flows through, and you can also see where it pairs very nicely with the warehouse, right? Just similar to the military, right? Most people come in entry level, right? They don't have prep or training. They're coming in as new recruits to this area that they know very little about, except at least in the military, maybe it's not long enough, but you get some concept of a boot camp. Or in the private sector, boot camp's like you sign your paperwork that day, and then you almost need productivity day 2. That's a pretty crazy transition. How does leadership play a role in that?
Yeah, I'll tell you, that's a good. You brought up a good point. As somebody's a leader from day one in the Army. Like, you could have 2 or 3 people standing around, and the Army teaches you somebody's always in charge. Who is it? It's not like a power trip in charge, but who's accountable? Who's responsible? Who's guiding this group? What are you guys doing? Where's your next place you need to be? Is everybody doing the right stuff? We're always taught that. And the one thing I struggle with it when I went to Amazon was they're very strict about what roles people can and can't do, right? If your team lead didn't show up one day, you couldn't grab your best, associate in whatever function and go, hey, I want you to act in the team. John's not here. You're the acting team lead today. Give it your best shot and show me what you got. Couldn't do that there. People are in roles. They don't have authority. They don't have the ability to tell another hourly associate what to do. They're not going to listen, right?
Do you know why that is? Is it like an HR
Well,
problem,
yeah, I do.
or?
Yeah, because it's because you're leaving the culture and the operation in the hands of people who aren't trained to do it, right? That's kind of what it comes down to. There's much stricter processes and things that have to be done. You have laws that have to be followed. It comes to coaching associates, and their process inside of HR that they're strictly monitored and kept. So it's understandable, but it's understandable, but it's something, obviously, something to get around, right? But back to the Army is somebody's always in charge. You get lots of opportunities to be in charge. Like, you realize that just being in charge is kind of just what you're supposed to do. The first terrible thing that happened to me in Iraq, my first deployment, was a missed turn, and I fired a couple of rounds in a vehicle, and I shot the driver, and I was calling for medical, and my convoy split. I just remember staying on the ground in this shit show going, we didn't train for this. We did not train for this. I remember thinking all the scenarios, all the things. I remember, they're really good about training you for deployments, because if something happens overseas right now and it's a big deal, they will make a training scenario out of that and fire that back to the U.S. so that units who are coming in are armed with the best training possible, right? We just didn't train for the scenario that happened to me. And I remember going, I got to figure it out. I just got to figure it out. Like, that's what it is. Leadership is figuring it out. Logistics is no different. People want to say no. Sometimes people want to say, no, that can't be done. It can always be done. What's the trade-off?
Yeah, I like that mentality, especially in logistics. We talk about that. We can get anything anywhere. It's just, what is that trade-off? Is it cost? Is it time? Oh, we missed a shipment. I need to get that there. I can put something on a plane, but if your product's worth $10,000 and the plane costs $20,000 to move it, like, is that a worthwhile scenario for you? Or we can get it done. It just might be a month late. And if that's to deliver your Christmas merchandise, then that probably isn't acceptable, but it's always possible. So then it's just
And
figuring
those are
out.
real scenarios. I mean, those are real scenarios. There's businesses all around the country right now today. It is November 15th. There is freight sitting either buried in a warehouse, behind in receiving, or on a container that's delayed, or behind in production that needs to hit the stores in the next, like, what is it, 13 days is Black Friday? That's going on right now. I mean, and there's some people out there saying we can solve this, but here's what we're going to give up, and there are others out there. Hopefully, they're only the 15 percenters who are saying we just can't get it done. We can't do it.
Yeah, I like that. And you mentioned, especially Amazon, you referenced it, talking about data, right? You talked a little bit about technology and robotics, and you talked about Amazon's great at moving two things, right? Product and data. And so I'm curious, we've talked about, obviously military probably has a different level of data as well, but data and logistics, what are some of those key things like, or specific items? You mentioned KPI too. Now in your current role, or maybe what you saw at Amazon, what are some of those key data points? Like, what are things you look for? You mentioned utilization, that might be tough to measure, but what are some of the other ones that really stand out to you as really important data points in the logistics world?
Dude, fantastic question. Okay. I love talking about data. I'm all about data driven decision making, right? Data in real time. So, um, what comes to mind? I don't have all the answers, by the way, but like, what comes to mind when you ask me that question is you want data, you want to develop data around the operation that helps you maintain the best efficiency, right? Best cost, right? At the end of the day, if I had all the KPIs and data feeds in the right times, in the right, visualization formats, Tableau dashboards, it would be what's my operation doing right now? How much product are we moving per hour? Where are we going to end up at the end of the day? And how many hours am I going to spend doing it? That's my job right there. Simple and foremost, right? That's if everything's working perfectly. Sometimes we get into operations that are very, very complex. And then you need some other types of data points. One of them I like to have is around exceptions. Everybody has errors and issues, right? Amazon, I'll go back to Amazon. Amazon is the gold standard. There's no doubt. They're a gold standard, right? They have every building has a problem solve function where things are collected and somebody works to resolve exceptions, right? This thing got virtually moved incorrectly and now it physically ended up here and nobody knows what it is. Okay, I'll fix that. And people do it. Going back to that quality at Amazon is, man, they are good at that. Like no package goes unshipped. That's the thing I love about Amazon is that 99.99% accuracy. They really are. They're that accurate. And when they're not, they're trying to be that accurate. They're trying to be that accurate all the time. So yeah, so data points around exceptions, like where we have challenging processes in different organizations. My a previous role that I was in, we had inventory issues based on how things were getting put away, and we determined the logic was incorrect, and that's why things were getting moved and had to be found and consolidated. And let's put some data points around that, and so data points in the middle of the operation are the ones that help, right? Not everybody gets to start that way. Like I don't get to start that way here, right? Big data can be big, it can be expensive, it involves multiple departments. Big companies have planning, forecasting, IT, data science, operations. I have back of the house operations. We have front of the house operations. We have storefronts. I mean, this company is, it's a different business model than the last one I went to. I was in an e-commerce company in carparts.com. We had fantastic websites. We shipped direct to consumers. That company was about the customer interacting with our website, getting the solution for their driving situation that they needed. And then we would package those parts up in less than 22 hours and put an email in your inbox that says your part's on its way. That was awesome to be able to solve that. We had no stores, by the way. So there's no stores associated with that. There's no store labor. There's no storefront operation. This is a different business model. We don't use as many warehouses. We can centralize logistics and spend less on our logistics and distribution, but we have big storefronts. So, to learn this side of the operation is now I got to treat my stores like their customers. It's no different to me.
Yeah, that's a really different mix. That's a huge transition. I think people struggle. you think, oh, we're just sending stuff and it's all the same. It's like, well, it's different when you get these huge trucks of things, break them down, store them in a warehouse, and then ship out individually at a parcel level. Or you gosh, with car parts, you're kind of doing this weird middle ground of like hard shaped object, right? You're sending mufflers, you're sending catalytic converters, these exhaust systems. Like these are not easy things to ship. You know, they go in my same
Yeah,
category as
yeah.
furniture, like things that basically things that suck to ship because you can't stack them all in a box, palletize them, and roll them out
Which,
because
by
it
the way,
just
which
it's
by the way
hard.
is why Amazon can't steal that business. They can't steal that industry. Yeah, everybody needs to Amazon proof themselves, right? Amazon can mass scale up an operation, but what they struggle with doing is having um, uh, depth of SKUs, right? Like, there's carparts.com lists over 1 million car parts on their website. 1 million.
Which makes sense. That's the name of the game in car parts. You know, there's no standardization. Amazon can consolidate to the top three, right, SKUs per category, whereas car parts, it's about going the other way. You need to be able to service all of these different makes and models of cars, which means
That's
you're
right.
going to carry 85,000 different switches because that's what you need to service the 50 million different cars in the
Yep.
US or whatever that number is. So it's just such a different game. And that makes sense. So thinking about,
And,
you
but
kind of
in here, there's so many nuances to everything. Like even my industry that I'm in right now, retail, right? Marshall Retail Group puts up the coolest stores all across the country. There's local flavors. There's Dallas Cowboy stores. There's stores based on local culture where they bring in local product. But there's also high-end retail items that we stock that people like to see in our fashion stores. And fashion is seasonal. So in carparts.com, I could get a container of F-150 headlights that we're going to sell through in the winter storms because everybody's going to be running into each other. And I can stock a ton of those in the warehouse or multiple warehouses across the country, right? In here, we're doing things different. It's get it in, tag it, add value to the thing, prep it for storefronts, and get it directly out there. It can never touch this warehouse.
yeah, you want it in the warehouse the least amount of time, right?
That's right.
Because that's how it's working. And Calissa, you're asking a little bit about this, but for people who don't know, we were talking about MRG and we've talked about it, all the different retail stores, primarily in airports, right, Derek? That's the real strength of the operation is you guys have a lot of unique retail stores. So most people have shopped in them. So what are some examples of those stores in the airports? You mentioned the Dallas Cowboy store. What are some other stores I would have gone in and shopped in that are Marshall stores?
Well, Marshall Russo is one of them. We have Toomey. We have a Lego store somewhere. I remember I've only been here 2 months, so there's like 325 stores in current operation. There's 20 more on our new store opening list. I'm buried in some data points I haven't quite understand. But I'll tell you one of the stores I get a lot of excitement out of, and that's the Welcome to Las Vegas stores that we have all over town here. We're in airports, we're in resorts, we're in casinos. Uh, Here in town, we've got Forum shops. We've got Caesar's Palace. We've got Mandalay Bay. We've got the Venetian shops. We've got these beautiful Welcome to Las Vegas stores that carry just so much color, so much flavor, and it's cool because it's all unique stuff. And we do stuff like that all around the country, New York and Dallas as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that about Marshall Retail Group because I recently went to Brazil for a hackathon with our company LoadSmart. Shout out to all of our Brazilian listeners. And we traveled for 24 hours just to get there and 24 hours to get back. I think we went to like 3 different airports, and each airport, you hang out while you're waiting for, your next flight. And we went and checked out some of the local shops, and it was kind of cool to just experience a little bit of Brazil through the airports, rather than
Isn't
it
that
just
yeah?
being the Hudson Group, Hudson News and
Right.
all of that over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. We do that too. I have a new appreciation. Like I'm not a shopper. I never was.
Yeah.
No, I'm not a shopper now. I won't be. I wasn't a car guy before I went to car parts. I'm not one now. But I can appreciate I can appreciate what we do. I mean, it's super exciting to know that we have local vendors that get the opportunity to sell or at least present their merchandise to hundreds of thousands of travelers a year who might otherwise not step out into their city and see that culture. I mean, that's cool. That's neat. It's not junk, it
Yeah.
could be junk. It could be junk.
Yeah. Very true. I also kind of like the museums. I know this is kind of weird, but a lot of the airports had museums too. I mean, even or Phoenix, we have museums in the airport, and you can just learn a little bit about the city while
They're
you're hanging out.
little, they're little cities. They're run like little cities. They're all
Yeah,
different, by the way. That's what I've learned.
yeah,
As I've
yeah.
as I've learned to do logistics in, around, and through airports,
Which has to be a
there's
nightmare.
it is a nightmare. Yeah,
Oh my god.
let's call that a barrier to entry.
Yeah, no, that's huge, and I think that's the interesting part. I came from a lot of big box retailers, and the ideal part of that. So like the Circuit Cities, the PetSmarts, O'Reilly Auto, Sprouts. The name of the game was uniformity, right? Everyone wanted to have a planogram, less than and over time it proliferates. But if it was up to everyone, you'd have one store layout. They're all 19,000 square feet. They have the same number of aisles, rows, and everything goes the same way. But if you build stores like that, you might be more efficient, but you're going to leave things on the table. It's going to be less of a good experience because you want to be able to have a 6,000 square foot infill store in downtown, wherever, but you also might have a 35,000 square foot big box in the suburbs, and you want to be able to adapt and do all those. But it's hard. We kind of ignore the customer a little bit, and that goal is uniformity. And I think at your current world, Marshall, you flip that on its head. It's the reverse. Actually, each thing is unique and custom in its own way, and so
Did
that
you
probably creates all
did you
kind of
visit our
challenges.
website? Did you visit our website? We
it's
we do create unique experiences. It's true. It's really good.
and
That's
it's
really cool.
wild, and it's just such a difference from the logistics standpoint, because again, in retail they want to treat it like a factory a little bit. You want every store to be the same, which means they get the same shipments, generally the same cadence, adjusting by volume. They all carry the same SKUs, or at least 95%. And you're doing the exact opposite, which really just makes everything harder. The reason they're going for uniformity is for ease of operations and lower cost. But you have those same pressures of you're expected to deliver ease of operations and lower cost, but it's with these, essentially 300 unique footprints.
Not
What does that
everybody
look
can.
like for you?
Yeah, not everybody can do the hard stuff. That's what I always say. Not everybody can. Some people choose the easy stuff. Um, I don't know how I got myself in this situation. It is exactly what you said. It's super unique. It's the most complex way to do it, but it's what we do, and we do it really well. It's fun to do. It's fun to do something different. It's like nothing. I mean, just to be fair, it's like nothing else. I mean, it's not unlike any other job I had in the army or civilian world where you just had to figure it out. Like you can you can have an attitude of saying, immediately looking at something and going, that looks difficult. We probably can't do it. Or you can take it on and be like, so you want to get one of those to all 350 stores at the same time before Christmas? I got it. I got that. I'm working on that right now, by the way.
Well, and I love that too, because again, it sounds hard operationally, but you mentioned barrier to entry. Like doing business at the airport is harder. So it naturally keeps a lot of people out of it. Creating 300 unique experiences is harder. So it keeps people out of it. And I think people underestimate that's a competitive advantage. Doing something hard is actually what kind of puts you in a special
That
position.
goes, yeah, that goes. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson, man. He talks about personal responsibility, individual responsibility. If you just take that mantra on in life and everything that you do to include work, there's always more reward in doing the hard things the right way or
And
the
there's a
best
real
way.
business reward behind it too. Um, Derek, this has been an awesome conversation. We're coming up near the time. We talked a lot about, and you could see it layered in like nearly every aspect of things you highlighted around leadership. And so I wanted to see if you wanted to end us with just whether it's any suggestions, recommendations, or just strong thoughts you have about leadership specifically in the logistics industry.
100%.
Yeah, so just curious what you think there to close us out.
All right. So I walked in my warehouse this morning. It's 7 o'clock, and my guys are excited. We got a big visit going on this week, and housekeeping is first of all. I'm always about housekeeping. I learned that in the army, by the way. You always improve your foxhole. That was the first lesson from the woods of Fort McClellan, Alabama, when I was trying to dig through like cold mud. Right, make your foxhole better. But I didn't do a good job at it. But the lesson stuck. So that now today I walk through the warehouse and I go, all right, guys, let's look at that right there. Like as a senior leader, I'm fortunate enough to have enough self awareness to know that there's a couple things I do really well. One of them is I pay very close attention to the details and I address them. I don't walk by anything without being dressed. And I gave a lesson today. I love taking new people and making them first line leaders. And this can work at every level, and it can work outside logistics or anything else. But to look at what you're doing, like we struggle, right? Sometimes, like as a group, as an organization, we struggle with the work that needs to be done. We don't have enough people at the lowest level doing the work. And what tends to happen in that scenario is, well, the first line leader jumps in and starts getting his hands dirty, right? I want to help out, but am I really helping out, right? Just roll that forward 6 months. Roll that mantra forward 6 months. I'm the first line leader, and you know what? I jump in and help out every time it's needed. It's just standard business. I operate the forklift. I'm the supervisor on the forklift. That's the perfect example of why is your supervisor on a forklift, right? Is it because that task needs to almost never get done, and therefore we haven't trained anybody? We could get around to training somebody, but it's not that impactful. Or is that supervisor always running the forklift? And therefore, who is he supervising, right? So it's like, get your head out of the sands, right? Don't work down in path. The lesson I'm sharing with them, or at least I did this morning, was don't work down in path. I want supervisors supervising, right? Above the supervisor is an ops manager. If the ops manager gets the opportunity to step into the building director role for a couple of days, then his supervisor should get the opportunity to step into the ops manager role. That's working up in path. That's teaching somebody how to do something. I'm all about that. I'm all about throwing somebody in the fire, hearing that, Supervisor John's first day running a full shift. I'm going to go down and find him, see how much pressure I can put on him to make him crack. He won't crack. I'm going to pat him on the back and we're going to be happy. But what I don't want to do is walk down and find John running a forklift all day long, right? That means he's working down in path. How many coachings did he give an associate that day? How did he stop by and touch base with his team yesterday that didn't perform well, and he figured out what their challenges were and wants to let them, attack it a different way today? Like, those are the types of things supervisors should be doing, not working down in path.
That's awesome. I like the blend of being focused and attention to detail. Working up doesn't mean ignoring those things. It means assigning responsibilities and delegating to the appropriate people. You notice it, you highlight a plan, you hand it off. But just because you're higher level doesn't mean you don't notice the trash on the floor or the bent beam in the warehouse. You still address those. You're just not the one getting in to physically do it, because then you're not doing what you should be doing, which is walking around, supervising, connecting with your team, and coaching.
Everybody has a role. Everybody's got a role to play. When I remember when I left company command from the Army, and that ceremony is supposed to be all about you, man. And some people really live that up. Like, this is my ceremony. I've got all my family here. They're going to give my wife flowers. We're going to have cake afterwards. I get to make a speech. I just remember saying, like, I just did my job. Like, I was a member of this company like everyone else. I recognized that I had more responsibility and more authority, and I tried to put the right amount of energy based on what was sitting on my shoulders. So one team, one fight, everybody's involved. Lessons go from the top to the bottom, and everything really is about leadership.
Well, I'm going to take this second to plug Calissa, because she wouldn't say it herself, but you would love working with Calissa, because what you just described at the warehouse, she does with our product. And it's a little harder to see it in product, but like the same way that you're a steward of your warehouse and you probably know where that pallet is off, that beam is twisted, she does that with our product. Like, she is walking our product every day in like demos and things like that. And she knows the underlying things that no one else sees, and she stops to pick them up. The difference is we don't pick up trash. We create tickets, right? We create user stories, and we follow up with our engineers to make sure they get delivered. So we have a positive customer experience. So all that like stewardship of your warehouse, that's what Calissa does with our product. And so that's why we get so geeked out and excited about our product, because we take extreme like pride and ownership of it, because we're constantly walking around and doing things like this. And so I think the same way you model your warehouse culture and care about it and think about that, I think we do it the same way with our product. It's a lot less steps, so we still have to go exercise more because we do it from our seats, but the exact same mindset and behaviors of like cleanliness, like For you guys, it's seeing physical trash or seeing things that are going to cause a safety incident or prevent you from being productive. For us, it's bugs in the software. It's an incorrect user experience. It's difficult to understand, or like things don't just work quite the way they're supposed to. And Calissa owns that for our, hundreds of thousands of lines of code. And so I think in a different world, she is you. She's just that from a software perspective.
I really
That's
appreciate that, Jeff.
Yeah, down you can get to the margins. Yeah, being able to go from like, the high level vision strategy immediately down to what that looks like on the ground, right? That if you got to be able to link those two things, and that's a good skill set to have. So good for you, Melissa.
Oh, thanks.
We call that translation, right? You can see the high level
Yeah.
views, but if you can't tactically connect those, then what are you even doing? So
It's
I think that's an
interesting
awesome
you said
call
that.
out.
Yeah, that one of we could have another conversation someday about what I did in the end of my career in the Army. I was brigade operations officer. The operational level was you have strategic. The Army has strategic, operational, and tactical. Right? Strategic is we want to take that piece of land and control it, and the tactical is this truck moves from this point to that point at this time and holds, right? There's a lot that goes on in between there. And all of that is generated by one brigade level to take all that and turn it into execution. So I really enjoyed that. I'm doing that right now. You have strategic vision of this company, which is to grow, expand, create more unique experiences everywhere we are and could possibly be. And that's got to get translated into what that looks like on the ground at the margins.
That's awesome. Derek, it's been so fun talking to you. I can absolutely see us scheduling just another time to talk and go through. I think we can dig in way more detail on some of these things, but I love the connection from military to private, your views on like data and technology to some extent. I would love to dig much further in that, how you're approaching problems and leadership at the warehouse. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time, and we can't wait to release this.
Awesome. My pleasure. I look forward to talking again.